Another component was a lot more sophisticated music software that took advantage of these loops and the high-quality sound samples. One of the first on the PC side was Sony's Acid Music Studio, but I think a real breakthrough point was with GarageBand, and then it started happening on the low-end side, the elementary school level for younger children, software like Groovy Music, and I'll comment more on those in just a minute. The last bullet point up there is also new tools to interact musically with the computer. Now we have, you can use your smartphone, you can use your iPhone, your iPad, apps on there to actually be musical instruments. All kinds of MIDI devices. About every instrument you can imagine can be, there's a controller for it. Whether it be string instruments like the Zeta violins or woodwind instruments like my own Yamaha WX5 wind controller, or for special needs students, like with the sound beam device, where all a person has to do is break the light beam to make music gestures. So this enables people to interact with the computer in ways that they never could do before, regardless of what their ability is. The next slide, please. Back up one. And so, again, this music creativity revolution really democratized music composing, just like it happened with publishing back in the 80s. Anyone can use these tools to create music. At the simplest level of just taking loops and letting your ear be the guide. And for the first time, being able to read notation wasn't necessarily the first requirement to be able to do composing. I contend that from the earliest age, whether we're trained in music or not, we're subconsciously developing our own sense of what's musical and what isn't, just based on the music that we hear and the kinds of music genres that we listen to. So with a lot of this software, instead of what you see is what you get, what you hear is what you get. And I guess if we're going to make an acronym out of that, we can call it, instead of WYSIWYG, we'll call it WEWIG software, although it doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same. Next slide, please. So to me, a key breakthrough. The day I saw Apple and Steve Jobs show GarageBand, I thought, and even though software like Acid Music Studio and others had been around, I thought this is an incredible breakthrough. This is going to make a real difference in how we can use technology to approach a larger group of students in our schools and get them doing things creatively. Now, what was so great about this? Well, the user interface was so simple and intuitive. And secondly, it came with an incredible library of thousands and thousands of sounds and samples that could be drawn on to create music. And it was smart enough to automatically adjust pitch, to automatically adjust tempo, to make the loops and samples all fit together. This next slide shows, and I'm just picking two pieces of software to illustrate, although there are many others. To me, Groovy Music was a wonderful example of taking the same concept and making it happen for younger children. Instead of the typical interface of a sequencer with tracks and so forth, in this case, we had all kinds of geometric shapes that could be used to represent the melody, the rhythm section, the arpeggios, the clusters, the tone clusters, and all the other kinds of things that a young child could drag out onto the timeline and create a music composition. The Morton Subotnick Making Music series offers the same kind of options for composing, and even helps with the bridge from a graphic painting of sound to the later just actually move the children into translating that into music notation. Now, in just the last year, a major breakthrough to add to these software tools are a number of web-based apps. And this slide shows Aviary's MINA software. It is a full-featured digital audio recording, loop-based software. You can actually plug a mic into your computer. It's all what they call cloud computing. The next slide, I think, shows NoteFlight, which Sandy McLeod was just doing the previous session in this room on. Again, it's a music notation program that's all web-based. It can be run off of any computer, anywhere, just so long all you need is a web browser. And the third slide shows another one. It's Hobnox, H-O-B-N-O-X. Hobnox is an audio tool, which is a really cool kind of sequencer app that's all web-based, where you can take and connect all kinds of different hardware to create, in the tradition of the old analog sequencers, to create music and sounds. So, next slide. So, I've quickly given you a quick overview of some of the things that have happened in terms of technology and the kinds of software that's evolved from all this. And now we want to talk about what impact this has on our students and the students that we can reach here. I'm quickly looking back to the chat here to see. I saw some comments going here. This school, we have a new tech high school. I saw some kind of question about Sibelius Groovy. Yeah, it was, I'll type in there. It was NoteFlight, which Sandy McLeod did, and then it was Aviary MINA, was the digital audio looping software that was web-based, and the other one was Hobnox audio tools. It's supposed to be tools, not tools. So I'm going to skip this slide and come back to it. Okay. We'll come back to that at the end. Actually, starting back in 1980, I wrote an article for the Council of Research in Music Education, reflecting back on the Tanglewood Symposium and how the Tanglewood Symposium in the 60s strongly recommended that more needed to be done for the general music student that were not in performing ensembles, with very strong recommendations to MENC that more effort needs to go there, that as my diagram shows, as we progress up from the beginning with elementary school where everybody gets to participate in music, we have this inverted pyramid where as we get to high school, we offer music for fewer and fewer. It becomes much more selective, much more specialized. And in the 80s, I wrote this article for the Council of Research in Music Education, strongly advocating that there was a wonderful research opportunity here. We need to be investigating this further. In about 10 years ago, I was teaching a graduate seminar of music on a graduate program at Illinois State with most all the students were teaching out in the public schools. And so I started asking the question, do we know what percentage of students are actually actively involved in music in schools and which ones are being left out? Thinking all the way back to Tanglewood of 68. And with one of my graduate students, Nathan Edwards, we went out and got 4 states here to contribute heads data that they collected on what students are enrolled in what classes. And out of this, we came up with approximately 82%. So it was from this that we started referring to the other 80%. How could we use these technology tools and software to reach the other 80%? I'll go to the next slide. And for lack of a better term, I started calling these non-traditional music students. Why did I do that? Well, in talking to people and reading about these students, I came up with a set of criteria that would try to describe who these students were, who the 80% was that were not being reached. Well, typically these students were in 6th to 12th grade. Many of them obviously did not participate in the traditional performing ensembles. There's evidence that many of them had quite an active music life outside of school, and they saw it as completely different than what was being done in school. I actually have a case of a young 8th grade girl who was in a class working with one of my students, and I asked her why she didn't want to participate, and she said she hated music. And a couple of days later, I saw her walking around the halls with her iPod, with earphones in here, and I stopped her and I said, are you listening to music? She said, yeah. I said, I thought you hated music. And she said, well, this is my kind of music. Many of them don't play a traditional school kind of instrument, but many of them will play drums or guitar or sing. And a lot of them simply don't read music. And in talking and doing some reading, I found that sometimes these students are unmotivated academically and may have discipline problems. Now, these are all posted on our website that we're going to tell you about. But it's going to be interesting. Rick, in a minute, is going to show you from his national survey how his data that he collected matched up on my hypothesis that I formulated almost 10 years ago to try to describe these non-traditional music students. A book that I ran into in 2002, How Popular Musicians Learn, was a real breakthrough for me and something I immediately shared with my students. Lucy Green lives in the UK. She's written several other books. But a couple of just short quotes here really drive home the points that Rick and I are trying to make regarding the non-traditional music student. Lucy Green said, music educators should examine the informal learning practices, attitudes, and values of popular musicians. That we can learn a lot from that. And her whole book is about her research in interviewing popular musicians. Another point that she makes is popular musicians rarely use music notation. If they do, they often learn to use it later in life when professionally they see a need for that. And they may have their own notation that they invent just for their own purposes early in their career. And she says we could continue to bypass those children and young people who are nonetheless highly musically motivated and committed in their lives outside the classroom. And I think what we're going to show you today is a lot of music teachers are finding that using technology, we can in fact reach those kind of students.